Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kadar Woman podcast, the podcast dedicated to amplifying the often overlooked success stories of remarkable African women who are barrier breakers, status quo challengers, and change makers around the world. I'm your host, Lala Shaver Harris. So today we're diving into the extraordinary journey of Irene Asare, a woman who's redefined success on her own terms. Imagine leaving a thriving corporate career in London to chase a dream across continents. From Ghana to South Africa and back again, her path is paved with bold decisions and unwavering determination. But here's the twist. Just as Irene thought she had figured it all out, she decided to launch her own business, Carvin Clay, in the middle of a global pandemic. Talk about courage. And so in this episode, Irene's going to share her insights on taking calculated risks in her career, overcoming cultural barriers and self-doubt, and more. And if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a career professional, or simply seeking inspiration, her story promises to leave you with some lessons and a renewed sense of possibility. Oh, that was a good segment, by the way. Should have recorded that. How we talked about hair.
Exactly.
All right, so I do have a recording. So, hello. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Irene Asare.
Yes,
How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much, Lola.
No, this is good. I'm loving the fact that we get to talk today, and of course, love everything about your personality, what you do, what you bring to the table, and I can't wait for us to just kind of dive in. And so, thank you for being here on the Kadar Woman podcast. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I love talking to you, and I'm always happy to share. So, yeah,
cool.
Pleased to be.
So, anyone who was listening is probably either recognize how I greeted you, or is probably wondering, what did I just say? And so let's just start from there. Where are you from and where are you based?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'm Ghanaian, so I'm from Ghana, West Africa, but I was born and raised in London and to Ghanaian parents who kind of migrated to London. So I definitely identify with being an African woman. I'm now living in Ghana and I have lived on the continent for the last 11 years. So I definitely feel right at home here. So that's my long-winded explanation.
Oh, no, that's awesome. And we're going to even dive into that, right? So let's start from the top. You talked about living in London. I mean, being born in London to Ghanaian parents and then moving back to the continent.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Let's start from there. How, why? Give us the works.
It's just interesting. I mean, the good news is I feel like now there are so many people like me. Like when I was growing up, we were quite an anomaly, like quite different. So I had African parents and it wasn't trendy as it is now, and I just remember knowing that there is a whole other world that my parents would dive into that I didn't know anything about. I was so curious. What was really interesting, Lola, is when I was younger, I don't think my parents thought I could understand our local language. So they would have conversations. And I remember one day we were sitting in a car and I responded, I said something, and they both looked at each other and they were like, my goodness, she understands what we just said. So I think it's bizarre considering that, especially my mum would always speak to me in the mother tongue, right? But I guess I naturally, because I grew up in London, always responded in English. So it's really interesting. And I think a lot of people like me have the same challenge. Like we're speaking to our parents, and my dad's passed now, but we're speaking to my mum and she's speaking local and I'm speaking English and we're having a conversation. And that was very normal, so it was good growing up in London, I have to say. I didn't really experience discrimination or racism per se. Well, it certainly wasn't blatant. But I always knew that I was different. There was a lot of things expected of me. I had a lot of responsibility. I was the oldest at the time with my siblings, and I had a lot of responsibility. So I knew that we were different. We'd eat different food. I knew that my parents were quite loud. the phone and things like that. And, they would always be speaking in their language, and I would be like sometimes the interpreter for my mum in particular. So it was great though. It was fascinating. Love London.
So what is your mother tongue, native language?
Twi.
Twi.
So
Okay.
TWI, Twi.
Okay.
So I have an interesting accent as well, like many others like me. So I speak Twi, but it has its wonderful English accent. So often people make me out. They're like, "You're not speaking real Twi. Your Twi is funny. It's got a funny kind of accent." So I always get the Mickey taken out of me for that. But the good thing is I completely understand, which is amazing because, again, because of my parents, they're Ashanti. They're very strong. Traditionally, we keep our Ashanti culture. And so a lot of the time, even friends that I have that now live in Accra speak Twi, but the Twi from the Ashanti is very strong, very different, very deep. So I understand a lot of the parables and all these interesting things that one sometimes says. So yeah, that's me.
So yeah, but that would have also helped you transition back to the continent, right?
My goodness.
And what was the impetus for you moving back home, and how did you make that transition?
I know, it's so interesting. And a lot of people said to me, "You're so strange, you're so bizarre, why?" And like I said to you before, Lola, I just had always, when I was growing up, for me, there was something missing. I was so intrigued at this other side that I knew nothing about, apart from through my parents' eyes and my aunties, my uncles, and all that. And they would come and they would talk about Ghana in such a wonderful, loving way that I thought, I want to be part of it. And actually, when I was around 18, I remember sort of leaving the community I had grown up in, so a very multicultural community, and wanted to find my peoples, like meet other Ghanaians, and that was interesting because I was then open to a whole world of, going out, having a good time, meeting lots of people from Ghana, and really identifying with that whole community. And so I was always passionate. And I kind of knew that I was going to go and live in Ghana, but it didn't happen quite immediately. So I like the fact that I was from Ghana. I like the fact that we would talk about it. And the first time I actually came to Ghana was when I was 18. So it's quite old. When I was 18, I came, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I thought I was going to come to Africa, that I wouldn't be able to eat for a month. And the food was even nicer than it was in the UK. I was like, this is me. But funny enough, at that time, I never thought I would live. I thought I would certainly visit. I liked it. I enjoyed it. And I guess as you get older, things change. And so what then happened is then I met my husband in London. And then we then decided naturally that we wanted to move back.
So he's from Ghana as well?
He is, yeah. He went to school in Ghana, but never stayed as an adult. So we were both kind of like, wouldn't it be interesting? Wouldn't it be interesting? And then lo and behold, there we were. We took the plunge. An opportunity came up. And I always said to myself, I wanted to continue my career. I'm an HR practitioner, and I wanted to make sure that was never compromised. And he also wanted to make sure that he wasn't compromised in his work. And so we joined Vodafone, both of us actually. An opportunity came up, and we took the plunge. And in 3 months of finding an opportunity, we left.
Wow. So did you do anything specific to help with that transition? 3 months, because you have a family.
I know. And my youngest was 1, turned 1. And you can just imagine, there were friends were like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And, honestly, when I look back, Lola, I'm glad I didn't think deeply about it, because I think if I did, I wouldn't have gone. There are too many reasons as to why it wouldn't have been the right time. The children, maybe if the opportunity doesn't work out. All of my family, by the way, were in London. So it's not like I was going to go back to my parents. My parents were living in London. My sister, my brothers, everyone. But I just felt like it was something that we wanted to do, an opportunity for us. And the view I had at the time was, if it doesn't work, we can come back, you know. And that's how I did it. So I resigned from my job. I resigned. I was head of HR for a fantastic company at the time. I resigned, I took it all in, and we went. And it was and is one of the best decisions that I've made in my life.
I love that. I love the fact that it was a fearless moment and you realize that if I noodle on it too long, you can talk your way out of it, which happens to a lot of people, right? Sometimes we get this spark, we get this inspiration, we get this thing that just propels us to probably go closer to what our soul's calling us to do. And then if like you said, if you sit in it, ask too many people's opinion, you can just talk your way out of it. And so that's amazing. 3 months is a lot to transition back to Africa. Forget another continent. We're talking about Africa. And I love my continent. I do. I mean, but there's a lot you have to have in place. You have to figure out a lot of things. And you had a 1-year-old. That in itself is
I'm telling you. But you see, I think what was interesting, Lola, I was in that regard very naive. Because the difference, I think, for others is they grew up in Ghana. I didn't. So in some sense, I had no expectation. You know, of course, I've been on holiday, and the company I was going to work for, Vodafone, they were very good at giving us a soft landing. So I felt like we were in good hands. We were not making the move because we wanted to make the move and we're going to find work. We had found work. They helped us settle in. Lucky for me, I then found out later, there were many others like me who were also in the same boat. So we kind of transitioned together. So I felt a level of safety. And to be honest, I knew no difference. So why not take the opportunity to go? And it was weird because, you know, we in the UK, it's definitely a multicultural society. But there are a lot of people who are British. You may have different backgrounds, but we all grew up in the same way. So this was definitely something I was doing that was out of the ordinary.
I love that. So the takeaway again is be fearless, challenge yourself, and don't be afraid to be different.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Believe in yourself.
So yes, believe in yourself. Exactly. So excuse me. I also know that you, like you mentioned earlier, you talked about just wanting to be an HR practitioner and just staying in that lane in terms of from a career skill set, expertise standpoint. And so you've also transitioned, you went to Ghana and then you got to South Africa, correct?
Yes.
And
yes, I did.
That was probably with a different opportunity. And what I'm curious about is, I do know just from, you know, learning more about your story that you had challenges that you did not expect. You were sacrificing family, friend, just to focus on the work because you're driven. If I had to piece that together. Can you talk about that transition to South Africa, what the challenges were and how you overcame that?
Yeah, for sure. It was interesting, you know, again, going back to my UK roots, you know, when we were all growing up and many of us had the same narrative, there was a lot of challenges in South Africa. So it wasn't a place in particular that I would be like number one on my holiday destination list because we all had this view of SA and the challenges. And so when the opportunity came up and now I was on the continent, South Africa, of course, I was like, I'm gonna go for it. But I was pretty worried. I was quite scared because I had thought, I haven't even been to this country before, not even on holiday. And yet I'm gonna take up a job assignment and move with my entire family. We just have no clue what this country is like and will they be accepting. So I was nervous and we took our first trip to kind of go look and see. And we love, obviously, you can't help but fall in love with South Africa when you kind of go there.
What part of South Africa?
So I was in Johannesburg.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was in Johannesburg. And so we landed in Joburg, as they call it, and we just fell in love with the place. And we said, right, this is an amazing opportunity, a much bigger operating company, bigger opportunity, so let's go for it. So yes, again, we moved after 18 months of being in Ghana, we moved to South Africa. What was interesting, I then had a good track record of success, right? So I had good track record in the UK, I came to Ghana, I led a project, it went well, I got promoted. So it was going all very well. And so I thought, you know, that wonderful success that I had elsewhere, I'll just carry it on my back and I'll take it to South Africa. Oh my goodness. how I was challenged. Let me put it that way. At the time, you can imagine when you're in it, you are, there's so many emotions. I don't know the country. I don't really know the culture. I had the dynamic of coming from Vodafone to Vodacom. They were just getting used to each other. Vodafone became the parent company, and therefore, Vodacom is an adult, in its own right. And so I was caught between this interesting organizational cultures, along with my own culture from coming from the UK thus via Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I arrived and people are like, so who are you and where you're from and why have you got this weird kind of accent? I thought you were from Ghana. So there was that going on. And then I guess, honestly and humbly as possible, I used the attitude of, I've been successful before, I'm going to be successful again. My attitude is direct, straight for it, let's go for it. And it didn't work. And I was like, why isn't it working? Why don't they like me? And there was a lot of self-reflection going on. I think at the time it was like, Irene, you've got to check, you've got to do something different. And I remember my boss at the time, sort of calling me in and saying, it's not going well. And I'm thinking, no, it's not going well. And I've never failed at a project. And I felt like I felt like I was going to fail. But that was an amazing conversation I had with her, because I just went back and did a lot of self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
You begin to realize that you're dealing with a different culture, different organization, different way of doing things. You have to learn to adapt. You have to learn to be different. You have to understand where your failings are and be honest. And I've been such a believer of being honest, that if nothing else, be honest to yourself about what you can and can't do. What you can't do, find solutions as to how you can do things differently. Because there's no leader, Lola, that you will ever speak to that will say that in their whole career, everything went sailing. It's just not true.
Right.
The reality, as leaders, we learn from our mistakes, from our failures, from things we haven't done well to improve and do them again. And South Africa was an eye-opening opportunity. Can you believe by the time I left Vodacom, I had really turned those relationships around. I had really created good friendships, good relationships, and I was successful. But there was a point where I thought, I'm not going to be successful, and this is going to be a true failing. And it's a moment that you have to reckon with yourself and look yourself in the mirror. So it was eye-opening on many levels. I also had a little health challenge, and I think that became a kind of self-reflection, because I'm now tried to be into exercise and healthy eating and all of that. So it was a real eye-opening moment, humbling moment, but a moment that I'm proud of. And I'm glad I went through it, because I meet lots of people that never want to go through any challenge.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that you also talked about, you had come in with this idea, you had a track record of success, and then you're just hit with all these challenges from left field, and like you're probably asking yourself, was this even the right move for me? Because I've been doing this for a minute now.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing. Do you know what you're doing?
Exactly.
And so it sounds like the heart-to-heart conversation with your boss at the time helped kind of open your eyes, like you have to do something different. But was there anything specific that you started to do right away? So one set was you did a mindset shift where you realized you have to adapt, you have to just kind of meet them where they are, and taking the fact that this is different and you're going to have to learn, get through that learning curve, and you can't just zap through. But was there anything else that you did to help with that mindset shift and implementing that?
I did. I had to be very humble. I called my team. I had a team meeting and I did a one-on-one with everybody and asked them for feedback.
Wow.
And that's hard. That's real hard.
That is hard for a leader.
Oh, yeah. Because you could just imagine, people took the opportunity to tell me.
Of course.
And, I think, again, this is leadership lessons. You, as a leader, you've got to come down to people's level. You're the leader. We know that. You have responsibility. But you're no leader without a team.
Right.
So you've got to be able to talk to people in a way that is human and understanding. And that's where probably I was so much in the mode of delivery that I forgot that, guess what? You use people or you influence people to get things done. So without that, you don't have a function, you don't have a team, you don't exist. So yeah, that's the first thing I did. And it was hard. It was very, very hard for somebody like me at the time.
Yeah, but I can't imagine too, because I think one thing I learned recently actually about leadership in terms of how you define it is that, a true leader has followers, not prisoners, right?
Yeah.
The prisoners come from the fact that, or the mentality comes from the fact that if you're in charge and people have to do what you say by virtue of your political power in the workplace, versus people actually being influenced by what you do, your vision, and following you through that. Sometimes it's madness, quite frankly, but that's the difference between a leader and a manager, right? You're being able to carry people along with you. And so I think you touched on something that is so hard, which is being humble and understand that, what, at the end of the day, a true leader is a servant to the people that they work for. They have to come and help them succeed. And if you go through that physical exercise of having those conversations and getting the tough feedback, but knowing that, it's going to make me a better person, I think that's a win for you as a human being and as a leader and as, of course, the boss of what you're trying to do. And so, I would like to take that and transition into your beautiful baby called Carvin Clay. And I want to know I mean, first of all, love the name, love the creativity around that. Anyone who's listening can go check out her website, because I think it's really, yes, the marketer in me and the brand in me just loved her logo, but it's not just that. I think it's the story behind the name. Let's just start from there. How you made that leap into Carvin Clay and why you named it that way.
I know. It's like, again, I've always wanted to, and it's really interesting again, there's a lot of things that we say we want to do. And my kind of advice to people out there is be careful what you speak on, right? And be mindful of it, because when it manifests itself, you asked for it, So I've always wanted to set up my own consulting firm. And in some ways, that was a bit of the motivation for why I wanted to transition out of the UK, if you like. So I had done now 10 years on the continent and felt like it was time to leap in when I'm still energetic and able, and made the brilliant connections and the relationships I've made, and the desire, this huge desire to put positive, rigorous, professional, competent HR services on the continent, right? And I'm not saying that we don't have that. We have that in pockets. I want to be the company known for doing HR transformation, organizational change, policy, you name it, in a really good standard. So that was really the motivation. And I think the fact that I'd worked in a number of other countries across the continent, we have the same challenge. We need great leaders, we need great people, we need great practices. So just before the pandemic, I had made this decision. And then, can you believe I started Carvin Clay in March, just as we were going into kind of this whole lockdown and various things. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my goodness, what have I done? But one thing that kept me going was, it's all about people. At this point, beyond our health, it is about people. And I felt like actually we are still very, very relevant. The name came from this. I didn't want to say Irene Asare consultancy or anything of that nature. I wanted to have meaning behind what I was trying to do. So I really thought hard and brainstormed and came up with Carvin Clay. And people often say, is it carving, what is it? Carving a piece of wood. So think about the carving of a piece of wood, because that's in the logo. And then think about a clay pot. And what do we do with it? So I think about the carving of a piece of wood. Let's take it for you and I. We've been carved and we've been molded with the clay pot into who we are. Mm-hmm. Hands of others to help us do that. So really, it was the carving of clay. So carving clay is about molding and shaping of people, and therefore businesses and organizations. That's where it's come from. Because I believe very strongly that I wouldn't be here And probably the same for you, Lola. If you didn't have people to help you along the way,
Yeah.
if at some point you had to mold yourself differently, if you had to shape yourself with or without people, you've had to do things differently to get to where you are. And so really that's the story behind it. And then we put that in the logo as well, just to represent what we are trying to achieve.
I love the origin story of your name, and I think it speaks to what you're trying to accomplish. If anything, it's a visual representation of what you're trying to do, and it just signals that reminder, this is why we exist. So you said a couple of things that I did not know about. You started this in the pandemic. That's fun.
Yeah.
Oh, and so did you resign from your corporate job?
No, so I didn't. So what was happening, we were having a restructure at
Okay.
that time, and it was an opportunity for me to move on. So I took the opportunity because, like I said, at that point, I was ready to kind of do my own thing. And so that coincided nicely. Yeah.
And then you moved back to Ghana.
No, so I was always in Ghana. So
Oh.
when I left South Africa after 3 years, and then I came back to Ghana. So I've been back on the continent now for the last 5, going on 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you took an opportunity to just go jump in and start
Yes.
your own thing in the middle of a
Yes.
pandemic. Yeah, sure.
I tell you, I was like, what am I doing? But I think, it's everything happens for its reason. Everything happens for a reason. So I'm pleased because in a way, although business wasn't booming the way, of course, I would want it to, it's given me an opportunity to lay a foundation. It's given me an opportunity to do many things that maybe I wouldn't have necessarily done. So I'm grateful. I'm really grateful.
That's and I like that. And so you decided to start Carvin Clay.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you had to do off the bat to get going?
My biggest fear, Lola, was business development. I mean, I had been in corporate for 20 odd years, used to, like, as long as I say who I am, what my job title is, and the company I work for, doors open, right?
Right.
Right through to, like, I've now left, and the good thing, I had a good reputation. So I've now left, I've set myself up, but I felt so uncomfortable, like speaking to people about, this is my business. Do you want to engage with my services? It felt so unnatural because I was just used to either being a specialist, doing what I do, leading teams, using the company resources, right through to, my goodness, I'm going to have to do this again. And I tell you that the year's been fantastic. I mean, all of these things, I don't have the fear anymore. The way I used to have the fear, like you said, what did you do first? When I think about it, we had nothing. And now I have policies, I manage some clients, I provide them services, I can talk to you about marketing, digital marketing, I now can talk about business development, opportunities, and I think I've been exposed to lots of other entrepreneurs. That's been fascinating, like lots of different people I wouldn't normally have come across because you're more open. You're not, when you're with a company, sometimes you're a bit restricted. There's things that you can't do. Now I can be open to collaborations, opportunities that I didn't know even existed. So that's been fascinating, honestly.
I mean, there's so much actually to ask in that because I think what I heard you talk through is a mind shift again. You had to do that mind shift and reset your mind. And you said you had a big fear about business development. You had to go sell yourself in a different way without the backdrop of a corporate brand. I think there's a lot there because, again, there's fear baked into that. You don't know if you're going to land and succeed the way you have envisioned that. Was there anything specific you were doing to keep the mindset where it needed to be to get through that next adaptation of Irene?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a faithful person. So I am a Catholic. I believe strongly in God's direction and path for me. And it was a tough time because there are times when you feel that you're not being directed, or I don't really know, I'm not getting the call, or I'm not getting the direction. But I needed to always have a positive mindset. right? And a few friends that I sort of confided in would always say, Irene, you are going to be amazed at how successful this is going to be. This is normal. I think one of the things that helped me is, regardless of a pandemic or not, when you're starting a business for the first couple of years, it's not rosy. So I didn't expect it to be rosy anyway. And I'm pretty resilient, Lola. So throughout my career, I've had many challenges. The jobs I've done have been difficult, but I always bounce back. And I think that's what I held on to. To be honest, for a while, I was half in, half out, because I felt like, oh, if somebody offers me a job, maybe I'll just take it. It will just be easier.
Like that's a way out.
Yeah, as a way out. So I was kind of half in, half out. But I'm pleased to say, as I sit here today, I'm fully in, because 25 years of working for somebody else and doing corporate it takes time to shift. It takes time to check out of the last organization, the last way of thinking, and move on to you. And we all say we want to be the boss, but we have to realize what that comes with. Because suddenly the decisions of your company stay with you. You make the decision, you live by what the outcome is. You no longer have anyone to fall back on, but it's being able to put structures, advisory board, being able to speak to others, other entrepreneurs, giving you advice, and just really hardworking and learning. So I certainly felt that it was a wobble. It was definitely a wobble, but I felt like towards the end of this 1 year journey, I'm in, and I understand it and I get it. And I know it's going to be challenging and difficult, but I think my personality is such that I'm happy to be doing this, because I feel like, don't tell me I can't do this, because I'll do it. I can't give up. I can't say I've done this for a year and then I can't do that. I mean, the reality is the objective is still the objective. We still need brilliant HR practice. I'm also a career and executive coach. We also still need coaching. We also still need opportunities. We also need conversations like this. All of those things are still very necessary and required. So I'm in it.
You're in it. And the time when you talked about being half in, half out, that was a fear, right? Just like, can I do it? Am I going to sink?
Completely. And it's amazing, isn't it? The fear that can take over, can't it? And stop you from doing things. And for a long time, I just had a mental block. I'm not going to sell. I can't do it. I won't do it. And I would try and find other avenues of doing it. But the reality is I'm the brand and the product at this point. So you learn, you learn these things. You learn that actually people do want to engage with you. You learn that you are an expert. You do know what you're doing. You've done it for many organizations. Why can't you do it for yourself? It's just that it's that different type of confidence. And really, it's a bit like you've got a different goal. The goal each time gets bigger, isn't it? And each time you've got to think about how you can break down that goal and achieve that goal. And that's why I always talk about like SMART goals. And because I meet a lot of people or coach a lot of people that say they want to be a CEO in 5 years' time and they've only got 3 years experience. You've got to be realistic of what you're trying to do and how you're actually trying to go after it. And then once you've broken that down and you've got a bit of a plan, off you go.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think you're right. I think sometimes we jump in, and especially on the corporate side, and you just think, oh yeah, if I do A, B, C, D, this formula, I should be able to get there. But I think there's something about stepping out of that corporate mindset. There's nothing wrong in being in corporate America, but when you know there's more, because I'm guessing that you've been able to reach probably people that you probably wouldn't have reached at all if you'd stayed in corporate Ghana, corporate UK, corporate SA.
Absolutely. I mean, it's in a way, it's like two different worlds. It's two different worlds. When you're in that corporate, you meet lots of other people that are in corporate, right? And it's brilliant. You can collaborate on things. But when you are the entrepreneur, the opportunities are actually endless.
Really?
There are opportunities you wouldn't even have thought about, or maybe even from a distance, but you could never get involved because you are representing another organization, particularly at a senior level. So I just think it's tough though. Gosh, I can't say it's not tough. I can't say that there are, there are up moments or months, and there are down months, and it's not always flowing with business. But I think that what I know that I'm doing is I'm building a business. I'm not just I'm building a business with a brand that can transcend me and beyond. And I feel that for me is very important, because a lot of us in Africa want to build a business for me that lasts for 10 years, just for me. And once I've finished, business is gone. No, I see this as a foundation that we're building a long-term business that transcends me.
I love that. I love that view. I love that vision. And I think the key takeaway from everything you just shared regarding that transition is you took a bet on yourself, right? I mean, you bet on everyone else for 25 years, basically bet on other people's dreams or their companies, their corporations. And let's just take a bet on Irene and see what that does for us. And it's scary. And there's a mind shift, like you said. You just have to recognize the fear. You're still living with the fear, but realizing, you know what, I can do this. And it sounds like you also built the support network with other entrepreneurs, the community. Of course, you have to have a supportive spouse to get through all of this too. That's embedded in that, because there is transition across the board, just not financially, but also just how it shows up for the family, right? And so I think my takeaway from just hearing that is take a bet on yourself and just see where you land. You've already done it for everyone else. And like you said, worst case, you can go back. You really don't want to, but you can.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hopefully not. But yeah, you're right. But you're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, we've got to bet on ourselves, because we have track records where we've done it for others. Come on. And, you've worked hard for others. It's not a case of we've just got by. We've really done added value.
Yeah, it sounds simplistic when you put it that way, but it's like you said, it's a mindset and you have to overcome it. But looking back, what is the one thing you wish you knew, though, from the beginning of starting Carvin?
I think what's the one thing? I think just being more clear maybe on what my propositions were going to be. We sit down and we talk about a business plan, but I look back and I think that business plan was just on paper. It wasn't embedded in reality. So I think, but I don't know how one can change that. So I think the one thing is just getting a real business plan, and not trying to aim for the stars and the moon and the sun and everything else, but just aim for one thing that you want to do. Just one thing, because I love to do like 100 things, but aim for that one thing and spend the year doing that one thing very well, I think.
Yep. I totally can relate to doing multiple things at the same time. I would also like to get your perspective on just being an African female entrepreneur. Is there a misconception out there that you've had to deal with?
I don't know, actually. It's a really brilliant question. I guess because I'm in Africa, I haven't really experienced any particular challenge yet beyond the normal. So I don't see that isn't holding me back in any way. I think if anything is holding me back is me. Like you said, going back to that whole fear around, can I do this? Which I feel like I'm getting over it. But no, I think that one thing I would say, and I always say this, is that I think women, we talk a lot about supporting each other. We don't do it enough. We don't really do it, truly. We need to actively, outwardly support each other and have that strong network, just as men have, right? Because men are able to separate business from friendships or from whatever. We don't do very well with competition. So I think that would be just to collaborate more, I guess. But I haven't particularly had anything that I would say, hey, maybe it's to come. Maybe it's to come, because we've been all very quiet. But no, I haven't really suffered anything like that.
No, so actually you touched on something pretty important. You talked about more supportive, women being more supportive, but it's not an African thing. It's just a female thing, right? And
yes.
You also mentioned just being collaborative. Is there anything else that you, if anyone's listening, like, okay, how do we even, I want to support other women. How would I do that? What would that look like to you?
Yeah, I think that's a good one, because I think we have lots of these wonderful women groups that we get to know people, but we don't really get to know them. So my view is, I'm a fan now of these mastermind groups and these much more smaller, intimate groups. Just, get together with a couple of others, 3, 4, get together on a, I don't know, 2 weekly basis or whatever, and just talk. It has to be a safe environment where I can say, Lola, this week has been not very well. I've tried to do this. It's not working. What do you think I can do? And those other people can help you think through it, or I don't know, they have resources that you can tap into. I know that people have business coaches and there's all of that, but there's nothing wrong with sitting across from your girlfriend who maybe is slightly ahead of you, or even slightly behind you, or at the same side of you. Having ideas and being able to implement and saying, oh, let me connect you to this. Oh, have you thought of connecting you to that? I find that we don't want to, for some reason, we don't feel like we want to support each other's businesses. I feel sometimes I have to go to people I don't know. And they're more supportive than people I do know. Because sometimes the people I do know, maybe it's wrong. I've got all these preconceived notions in my mind that will say, oh, they won't help, oh, they'll ask me, oh, they'll copy my work, oh, that, and I think, I don't know, that's not healthy. I think we should be in a place where we can have that safe space to say, look, I'm on this journey, I'm an entrepreneur, you build yours, I build mine. If we can help each other along the way, let's help each other. That's
yeah. When you said that, it actually reminded me of, I love quotes. So one of my quotes that I thought about that I love when you said that was that it doesn't cost a candle anything to light another candle.
Yeah.
If you think about that, it literally doesn't. You can still shine, I can shine. And I think that grounds you and it grounds me when I'm trying to help, because I think some people do fear other people being competitive. But if you remember that if you're shining and you light someone else, you don't lose. And so I love that quote because it embodies, just it's simplistic in itself, but it makes sense. A candle can light another candle and still be a candle and still shine bright.
Exactly.
And if you're a fancy candle, you can have different scents.
Exactly. But it's so true. We just got to think about it in this way. I just think that if this is what holds, I think, women back. I don't know if it's and maybe it is an African thing. I don't know, but it certainly holds us back. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, that's a good.
And I think the other thing, Lola, is we need to think big. Sometimes we also think too small. Right, we need to think bigger than what we see in front of us. Because sometimes if I say, look, I want a business that transcends, I want to do, people are like, oh, look at her. Who does she think she is? But no, we need to think big.
I love that, and I'll tell you why. And I know we're running out of time here, but I think it's important to touch on what you just said, because in my course of just being in marketing and having a true passion for branding, I looked at the continent and I looked at a list of, the top 100 brands in Africa, and I was so disappointed when most of them were multinationals, internationals. And I said, there are people doing good work on the continent. So what is the problem? Is it that the criteria for this list is just, some ridiculous number that people are still building their way up there? Is it that no one's thinking big enough to get to that brand level to have that impact? Is there a cultural nuance? There probably is some cultural nuance there where you think Western is better than African, blah, blah, blah. But then are there people really thinking about it when they start to build? And so I love the fact that you said, I want something that transcends me, that would outlive me, would stand and represent this model of HR professionalism. I think that vision alone is going to carry you so far. And I'm excited to see where this journey takes you, because I think there's an opportunity there. Like you said, I think there's a unmet opportunity, and there are pockets, but there's nothing consolidated. It's all fragmented on the continent. Absolutely. Or even in the country, right? Let alone the continent. I'm excited.
Exactly.
I'm excited about this brand.
Yay!
You're building.
Yay! Thank you. No, really, really exciting. Really exciting.
Yeah. So a couple more questions before we go into
Yeah.
the lightning round. So there's something I also noticed about you, and you talk about showing up and being
Mm,
intentional when you show up.
mm, mm.
I would love for you to say it in your own words because I think that's very, very important that whatever you do, you need to show up.
Absolutely. And I think that for me, what is really important, and I remember saying this particularly in corporate, but guess what? Especially as an entrepreneur, you need to know your stuff, Lola. We're in a competitive environment now, right? And it's beyond geographies. So you need to know your subject matter and you need to know it well. And you need
Mm.
to know it from different perspectives and different angles. And then when you are either invited or not, you show up, you participate in the conversation, you bring an energy, you bring a dynamic to the table that, my goodness, if Irene was here, we would get another perspective, we would get something different. I know that as an African woman now, there are a lot of notions that we've grown up with, that African women can't necessarily speak, there's a lot of unbalance going on, but that is, the dynamic is changing. And we've also got many, many stories of strong African women from the very beginning of time. Yaa Santua, for one, in Ghana, is a good example.
Mm.
So it's, to me, you need to think through, you need to plan ahead. So when we're talking about being intentional, know where you're going. I meet a lot of women who really have no idea where they're going to. People will say to me, I want to be the next director, the next senior person. I want to be like you, Irene. Be intentional about that. By being intentional, what did I do? I made sure that I was good at my job. I made sure that I got results. I made sure that I was a good leader. I don't know what it is for others. It might be that they want to be a great entrepreneur. They've got a great product and they want to get it out there, and they make sure you market it, make sure you brand it, make sure you engage with people well on it. But I think we need to show up in a way that you leave an impact, you leave a mark. Someone's engaging with you, they're like, yeah, she knows what she's talking about. I'm not also saying you have to be the loudest person. No, I'm saying that when you finally engage with you, and Irene's quiet and she's reserved, but when she speaks and she says what she says, I know and I have confidence that she can do what she says for me. I think that's what is really important. And I think there are a lot of resources now that we can tap into. We've got webinars, we've got podcasts, we've got mentors, we've got so many avenues that we can tap into now. We need to use them. There's no longer excuse of, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go. Engage me as a coach, do something to kind of really move you to the next level.
Love that. I mean, if I had to summarize what you just said, basically you do the work and then you show up.
Yeah.
You put the work in, you figure out whatever it is you're trying to do, be great at it, get the results, and then just go out there and just make it happen and be intentional about everything. Goes back to what you said about that vision. Your goal with Carvin Clay is to transcend yourself. And I keep referring back to that because you may not know how you're going to get there, but that's the end target. And so when the opportunities start to show up that align with that, it's very easy for you to just keep moving in that track because you're intentional about where you're trying to get to and what you're trying to accomplish. And so goes back to, like you said, you've done the work, you get the results, and then you show up. So love that. And I think one last question before we dive into the lightning round, which I love that part, is I would love for you to just talk about some of your failures and just share one of your biggest failures. And if you want, you can put a big accomplishment with that as well.
So I think that I talked about South Africa because that was a very interesting point. I guess a project that I worked on that didn't go the way I definitely wanted. And I did two things. I guess I asserted myself when really I wish I had stepped back and said, right, I can do this project, I can make it work. And it didn't work because I didn't get, the leadership were not aligned. I personally didn't believe in the objective of it, and you're trying to make it work and you don't quite believe in its objective and what it's trying to do. So I think for me, that was probably the biggest failure because although I did get something out of it, you know, you look back and you think, "God, this wasn't nowhere close to what I wanted," because everybody wasn't aligned on this, and I felt like my reputation was tarnished because of it.
Oh, wow.
But at the same time, it's a learning, isn't it? It's, to me, what I took away from that is, you have to, what would I learn now? So if I'm going to work on a particular project, we've got to get alignment. We've got to talk about the consequences of not doing it well and what that means, and are we happy to accept that? We've got to speak up about these things, right? And it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're in that corporate environment. It's very difficult to speak up against your seniors and all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's just assessing the project, understanding what the scope is, being very clear on what the outcome is, and if it can't be achieved, being very clear on that. So, that's the learning I took from it. It was a great learning exercise, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, and I love the fact that you said that, because that was what I took when you said that. I wasn't aligned, no one else was aligned.
Yeah.
That means you're stepping out of something that doesn't have any value to you. And so sometimes we go through those motions, and then you have to kind of fail. Fail is a hard word, but it really is a learning opportunity, like you said. And maybe I should not use the word failure, but it also resonates with people. But the takeaway there is, there was value just going through that experience, because you realize I need to do things that align with me and what I value. And that it shows up in everything you do. You know, and sometimes there are consequences, like you said, about your reputation. But I think you've surpassed all of that. So let's go into the lightning round. And this is where you don't overthink, you just kind of speak whatever comes to mind. So first things first, what is the last thing you learned?
Oh my goodness, what's the last thing I
Could
learned?
be anything.
I learned that, what's the last thing I learned? Oh, I've learned a lot about marketing in terms of the backlinks and Google and its algorithm, and a lot. I think I've learned a lot recently about digital marketing. Probably fraction to what you know, Lola, but I've learned that, and it never even came up on my radar before.
That's awesome. Yeah. Your greatest fear?
My greatest
fear.
Oh, crikey. Probably that I won't be successful.
That's a big one. That's a big one. What would you consider your greatest achievement?
Oh, many things. My children.
I love that. Love that. What matters most to you?
My relationship with God.
Love that. Wow, you're just on the roll. Like, okay. What is your motto?
Oh, my motto is do what you say you're going to do, and do it well.
Do what you say you're going to do and do it well. I can see that. I see how it shows up. 3 words you could use to describe you, the Kadara woman.
Well, what would I say? I would say resilient. I would say determined and hardworking.
I love it. And last question, what are your thoughts on destiny?
Oh my gosh, I think that destiny, I think for me, being a Christian, I guess the good Lord knows best, but my role in that is that I help that process. So I'm going to try and do all I can to ensure that I impact me, my family, my friends in the world in the best way I can, by being a brilliant citizen of society and helping others wherever I can, and be kind and make impact.
And I'm cheating right now because I'm asking one more question, but would you say that you're doing your life's work then with Carvin Clay?
Yes, with Carvin Clay, yes.
I love that. Love that. Yes. Irene, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing. There's a lot of takeaways in this conversation that I hope resonates with people. I think I love the fact that you described what a Kadara woman is from your lens, which is being resilient, being determined, and being a hard worker. Yes. And on that note, just want to say thank you again for just giving me your time today and just sharing, and I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much, Lola, for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. You made me laugh at parts, so it's been awesome. And I look forward to engaging more.
Definitely, definitely. And there you have it. Irene's story reminds us of a couple of things. One, that success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder, but it's also about having the courage to carve your own path wherever that may lead. Since recording this inspiring conversation, we've learned that Irene has returned to corporate life in the UK, working for the BBC News. It also just goes to show that life's journey is full of surprises, and there's value in every experience. So remember, my dear listeners, it's okay to be afraid, but don't let fear stop you from betting on yourself. Whether you're starting a business, changing continents, or returning to familiar grounds, what matters is that you're growing and you're learning. So go ahead, light that candle of yours and help others shine. One more ask. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or share with a friend who could use some inspiration today. With your support, we can continue to amplify these untold African stories. And you can also follow us on social media at Kadara Woman. Thank you for listening, and until then, this is Lola reminding you that you have the power to write your own story, keep challenging the status quo, and never stop believing in yourself. See you next time on the Kadara Woman podcast. This podcast was created, produced, and recorded by Lola Shaber Harris and sound edited by Mo Isu. The Kadara Woman podcast is a production of Kadara Media.